I don't think The Last of Us 2 was as bad as it seems.
Trash! The game is trash! Your opinion is trash! Your life is
you don't understand it.
After 7 years, the long-awaited sequel was released. Expectations were high, the hype was real,
And it's gone.
Turns out you can't enjoy anything this year. But seriously, there was something that bothered me about the reviews, both good and bad. So I decided to check them out for myself. I used Metacritic as the source of reviews because I'm lazy. I looked at both critics and user reviews. So let's start with the critics. I read 100 out of the 108 critic reviews and sorted them along the following criteria: type of review, score, and personal opinion. I added my personal opinion just for fun, because around the 37th review, things started to get a bit tedious. So according to our pie chart, we can see that most of the reviews were given high scores, with over 87% scoring 80 and above. Next, we have the type of review, where 73% of the reviews were positive. Interestingly enough, most of the reviews that were mixed or negative received lower scores. So it's plain as day that most of them were neutral, which I meant as it didn't feel complete and missed some points, but it was okay. Then we have the reviews I liked. They made strong points that were fleshed out and added possible alternatives to problems that they had. Reviews that I labeled C=3 were basically... Now this last one caught me off guard because I didn't know where to put it, but I invite you to join me on this experience written by Muhammad. Being lucky may be the dream of every human being who believes in the randomness of time. A day when death and destruction are closer to man than anything else. Those who present themselves as gamers these days, but maybe a few lucky ones. In such cases, gamers can experience a work like The Last of Us Part 2. My boy! What is this? I came here for Last of Us 2 reviews, not man's folly in the industry. So it's safe to say that the critics loved it. What? Ah! What? Games aren't made for the critics. They're made for
You, the people.
So not good. The reviews I used were the most recent at the time, and since they weren't as long as the critics, I decided on a sample size of 200. And yes, I am unemployed. So according to our bar graph here, most users gave the game a score of 3 or less, while over at Twixbar, a few others gave the game a score between 4 to 6. I gave the one guy who gave the game a 7 a Butterfinger, because sometimes I feel like the only person who likes Butterfingers. Aww. So it's safe to say that most people didn't like the game, which brings me to my question. Why is there a disparity in ratings between critics and users? I decided to sort the answers based on the user's biggest problem with the game. Crunch refers to Naughty Dog overworking employees, bad dog, bad, and pandering. Well, apparently that's not a term to describe stuff pandas do, which in my opinion is quite disappointing and a real missed opportunity on Oxford's part. Problems that can pretty much apply to the last season of Game of Thrones were put into that category. And sacrilege, you literally can't shoot the walls because they have religious symbols on them. It disables your trigger squeeze. This game is absolute trash. I don't know where to begin with that one. So as you can see here, the story was the biggest problem for most people. Now I found that the plot and the gameplay gave two very different experiences. Here we have the summarized story. The large pictures representing key events and smaller ones refer to flashbacks. Note how the events flow into one another, forming an S, which stands for story. There's a coherent path from the beginning to the end, making a solid, digestible experience. That's because I cut off 4 hours worth of Abby's story. Let's add that in, shall we? See how the pattern changes to an X? Essentially, what we've created here is the video game equivalent of the X-Men timeline. The game starts off killing Joel, giving you more than enough reason to hate Abby. So you go off to kill this bitch, but then right when our main characters clash, they take you on this incoherent 8-hour flashback to get you to be empathetic towards Abby. Mind you, they also have flashbacks within the flashbacks, which ruined any chance of immersion I had left from this point on. If you want me to empathize with a grey area villain, don't straight up kill the man we spent the entire game learning to love. You can start the game from Abby's perspective. all the way from her spending time with her father to her daily life in the wolves. And then, at the end, you deviate Jackson to kill Joel. Joel's death can then be used as the catalyst for Ellie and Tommy to go after Abby, where you start the second act as Ellie. Then you can pepper in all the flashbacks of Joel and Ellie to keep the idea of revenge consistent in Ellie's act, where they face off in their conclusive battle. Speaking of consistency, I found that Joel and Ellie suffered from character changes to fit the narrative. What I mean by that is...
Holy shit. Help! Are we gonna help him?
Put your seatbelt on, Ellie.
Well, what about the guy?
He ain't even hurt. That's my brother. Joe. Y'all act like you heard of us or something.
Because they have.
Everything's crooked. Reality is poison. I want to go back. I hate this.
At the beginning, Ellie was upset at Joel for what he did to Firefly, and thought that her life would have had some meaning if she was used to make the cure. I thought that was brilliant! That we'd have conflict of interest between self-interest and altruism. Instead, they just kinda threw it away, killed my boy, and then reduced the entirety of Ellie to first season Zuko. The game. Personally, I like the idea of Ellie wanting to save humanity by her actions, based off what Joel did. That if she couldn't cure the infection, she could try to cure humanity, metaphorically. Imagine, if we go along with the sequence I mentioned earlier, Tommy is the character driven by revenge. This would be a good enough reason for Ellie to leave Jackson, as she wouldn't want to lose the last of her family. On her journey to find Tommy, she's presented with obstacles and information that changes how she feels about Abby. FYI, in the game, no one tells Ellie that Joel killed Abby's father. And I imagine they did that because it would cause the whole plot to collapse in itself. But if they did, it would make letting Abby live a far more reasonable outcome, as she understands the similarity between her and Abby. That killing her would make her no better than Abby. However, this only works with the power of choice. The Last of Us 2 wants you to feel the consequences of your actions. You can see that when you kill someone and their friend shouts their name, the horrible screams they make when they die, and killing off characters that you're supposed to like. But none of that actually works, because you didn't choose to do that. And that's the problem right there. I didn't really feel bad for these people because I had no choice. If you structured it so that I did have a choice, and that there were more negative consequences for killing people, then yeah, I'd feel terrible. I'd feel like the terrible human being you wanted me to feel like. A game that did exactly this was Dishonored. Dishonored is a revenge story, where our protagonist rescues his daughter and gets back at the people behind his wife's murder. But the player feels invested in how they go about that revenge because of two things: the ability to choose and the consequences of their choice. It gave me the freedom of choice, and I paid the consequence for killing a bunch of people later on, in both the story and the gameplay, which is great. So while it was easier to just kill everyone and move on, I chose the stealth route for the rest of the game because I didn't want the city to get worse. I think The Last of Us 2 could have used this approach to deliver the message of their story. I really enjoyed playing The Last of Us 2. Gameplay wise, it hasn't changed all that much from its predecessor, and that's okay. The only notable changes were more fluid controls and an expanded leveling up system, and more resources at your disposal, making playing the game fun. And herein lies the problem. The game aims to make you question your moral choices and reflect on everyone you kill, but it also makes combat fun and satisfying, which, you know, mixed messages here. Another aspect that bothered me was the missed potential of the infected. In the first game, I really liked the idea of different types of infected, forcing you to change your approach and think about how you want to clear an area. I felt some instances of that when we used clickers to kill wolves, but that's it. We only got one new enemy, the Shambler, which is a shame, because I think they had a lot of room to play around with this in terms of new species, hybrids, or mutualism between the different types. I know it's easy to hate on this game, but I kinda liked it. There's no denying that the story could have been better, but that shouldn't devalue the rest of the work put into this game. the amazing visuals given to us by the art team, the amount of coding necessary to get this game functional, and the voice acting. Or at this point, acting? I may not have agreed with the direction of the plot, but there were so many scenes I loved thanks to the performances from Troy Baker, Ashley Johnson, Laura Bailey, Shannon Woodward, and Stephen Chang. With respect to the last two, I think if they had given their characters more time to develop, they'd do wonders as supporting characters.
I really hope you make it.
Hey, Jesse's kinda bad out. I don't think I don't see you, Travis. I recognize that scream anywhere. Fangirling aside, the point I'm trying to make is that yes, the story weighs the game down immensely, making any 10 out of 10 review questionable. But it doesn't deserve zeros. Slamming a game for one aspect, granted, a big one, just doesn't feel right to me. Despite the convenience of it, I dislike the idea of assigning scores to games as the criteria isn't standardized and the scores rely on a quantitative approach for media with so much variety. I've always preferred a simple listing of pros and cons that reflect the experience of the game to the reader. I very much look forward to seeing what you think of the suggestions I gave, as well as other alternatives you'd have liked to see, or not. Maybe you completely disagree with me, and that's fine. I'd love to hear what you think regardless, as I may have missed key points or maybe gotten something wrong. Either way, I'm open to feedback. So yeah, those are my thoughts. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found something to take away from all this. It really means a lot to me if you like this video, and if you're interested in more, then I highly recommend that big ol' subscribe button there.